Wanted to string Reese here shorthanded. Reese stays with it. Reese right there, front of the net. What a goal! Broken up by the Sting. Roth handed off. Stratus scores! Peter Stratus with the blast on the power play, and just like that, we're tied 1-1.
Congratulations, Shane.
Thank you very much.
You were in Kingston yesterday. What was that whole experience like at Kingston City Hall being introduced?
Josling, no lane there. Drop back. One-timer scores! 5 forwards on the ice for Sarnia. Josling back to McGregor. He scores! Hi again, everyone. I'm Terry Doyle. Thanks for joining us here on the OHL tonight. Here's Josling scores! There it is! The teddy bear toss goal in Sarnia. Sean Josling.
You know, it's been a couple games since I scored, so it was nice to get that back going again.
Get to work on the cleanup.
For sure.
There's Sean Josling there. He is definitely, you can see the smile on his face getting the teddy bear toss goal. Up ahead, here comes Burke looking to break in. Burke on the forehand, he scores! Nolan Burke scores for the Sarnia Sting, and it's now Sarnia 2, Flint 1. Back out here to Perreault. Perreault shot, he scores! Jacob Perreault gets the goal for the Sarnia Sting, and just like that, we are tied 2-2. Give Perreault 37.
He's last, but he's certainly not least. Anyone who's followed the Ontario Hockey League for any number of seasons would recognize the familiar face of Terry Doyle, voice of Sarnia Sting Hockey on your TV, and host of many intermission hot stoves with broadcasters across the league over the past several seasons. Terry also pilots the weekly OHL News radio segment during hockey season, and it's a pleasure to be joined by him on OHL Voices today. Terry, how's things?
Josh, I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm hanging in there. It's interesting times we're in. You know, we've certainly been occupied with plenty away from the rink in recent weeks with all things COVID-19, of course, political elections and the like. But I know if you're anything like me, OHL hockey still kind of creeps into your mind fairly regularly. Has it been an odd fall for you? I mean, I know speaking as a fellow umpire, the summer wasn't quite the same, even though we both managed to get some games in late in the summer. But how have you been adapting to the funny schedule?
Adapting is probably the best way to put it, because we do have that normal almost 12-month routine where hockey takes up a certain number of months. Then you get into things like drafts and playoffs, the Memorial Cup and that, and then a little baseball worked in there and then right back at it. So it has been a change. I think the fun thing for me, at least this fall, while missing being in the rink, is I've had a chance to catch up with some former Sarnia Sting players, as normally during the season on your TV in Sarnia, we do a show, we call it Sting Buzz, where we bring a couple players into the studio and just shoot the breeze, talk about the team, but also talk about living away from home, school, their hobbies, whatever they're into, have a little fun sometimes, especially if you have, for example, billet roommates, and they'll blame each other for who steals the food or who broke the couch, for example. There's been lots of stories we've had fun with. So what we've done this year is caught up with some players by Zoom from outside or other parts of Ontario and even over in Europe. We've had some extended chats and have those long form half-hour chats. Had a good catch up with Dave McQueen, the former coach and GM, of course, longtime OHL coach with Peterborough, Erie, and then in Sarnia. He's over in Romania. We had a great chat just catching up about life in the OHL and life overseas and coaching and the differences in coaching. Nathan Charletti, the former Sting captain who finished in Owen Sound, who's in med school right now. He's always a blast to catch up with. Nick Latta, who played in Sarnia as an import player originally, but he has a Canadian passport as well. But he's back over in Germany playing, and just catching up with so many guys like that and talking about, you know, whether those guys that have played pro or a Charletti, a Brody Barrick, and players like that who've gone through and used the OHL education program and graduated. Daniel Nick Androff just finished York University. He's getting into coaching. He's got the coaching bug. He credits Trevor Letowski for kind of giving him that coaching bug. And he saw what Trevor did as a coach of the Sarnia Sting and now moving on to Windsor. So usually we have those chats and do the show, and then usually chat for another 20 minutes, half an hour afterwards on Zoom, just to shoot the breeze and catch up and swap stories and everything like that. And guys a lot of times asking me about current things going on in the league and going on in Sarnia. So that's been a lot of fun. And we've also been airing some Old Sting games and going through some of the archives to the Stamkos years and the Yakupovs and Galchenyuk type of years, and some exciting games that way. And we've been airing those on Friday nights. So having a chance to go through, and I'm the one that goes through and edits them down a little bit. So it's been fun. It's kind of filled the time that way in terms of being able to do that, to sort of fill the OHL bug a little.
Certainly the alumni community is one of the things that makes the OHL great. So nice to hear that you've been able to keep tabs with guys even after they've moved on to other things. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about your broadcasting start. I know you're originally a Peterborough guy. I believe you may have called some Generals games there around the turn of the century. Maybe share your path to the broadcast booth and shed some light on your time in Sarnia.
So, well, we might fill the show just with this part. It feels like sometimes it's been a winding road. It feels like my first involvement with an OHL broadcast was in 1990. What's now Your TV was doing the games in Peterborough on tape delay, and I was one of the camera operators. I was not in high school yet, let's put it that way. And I was doing camera for the games, one of the volunteers, as many people in this industry start as a volunteer, did that. And I can remember I was on sort of a third camera to start, and then the main camera person left. The second camera person was too tall to go to the area, the scaffolding platform area at the rink in Peterborough at the Memorial Center. So I remember hearing over the headset, I can't believe we have Eric Lindros in town, a sold out arena, and a 13-year-old on main camera. So, you know what? And I went to Pete's games in the 80s as well. I know I'm dating myself here, but that was my first involvement. And we did, did a live pregame show back then as well. And then the games were tape delayed, and, sort of continued on. That was the last year they did the games in Peterborough at the time, but still got my feet wet doing some other broadcasting stuff. I say it was what's now Your TV. And I said, hey, I want to try some on-air stuff. So did a basketball game, which was a complete disaster, but did some curling, got some hockey, even things like Atom tournament, midget hockey, those kind of things. Also did some non-hockey stuff just to get familiar with how to be on air, how to fill time, those kind of things. And a gentleman by the name of Grant Wade, who was the color commentator in Peterborough when I first was doing camera, he was sort of my partner in crime a lot of times. And even as a teenager, he let me carry the ball, because he was there to pick up if I struggled or needed some filler, rather than he was in full right to be the main person. No, he pushed me out there, and that really was a huge help for me. And, he was also at the time, the late Grant Wade was also the announcer at the horse racing facility in Peterborough. So he had the experience, but let me gain the experience. So that was great. But then when it came to the OHL, was always around Peterborough and got in with what's, at Checks TV, what's now the global affiliate in Peterborough, working with the Dalladays, with, Gary Dalladay, the sports director, and sort of dabbled in there a little bit behind the scenes. And then, sometimes just sort of lurked around a little bit and would stick my head into the radio booth with Pete and Gary Dalladay. And occasionally, when Gary would go out to get some fresh air at the start of the period, jump on headset for a minute or two with Pete just to get my feet wet. And then, moved down to Oshawa. Well, still lived in Peterborough, but worked in Oshawa at the, what was the Checks affiliate there as well. And was covering the Generals for TV, but then also filled in a little bit doing color with Dave Gilbert on the radio side when Roger Lajoie had many of his other projects going on. So did that and, sort of dabbled in there, and then even helped join Lee Cunningham on the North Bay Centennials broadcast a little bit, and then had that stretch for a while of sort of just, filling in here, filling in there. Toronto St. Michael's Majors, they were doing webcasts, jumped on there. And so from there till about 06, 07, just kind of did a whole lot of various stuff. By then, the OHL News Show had launched back in 02, I believe we launched that out of the league office. So, and then, of course, the OHL Priority Selection broadcast came along in 03 and started doing those audio only, and then going to the full show in 08. So it just sort of grew, and even, old games in Mississauga. And then, so Your TV came back and doing the broadcasts in around 03 and was hosting and doing color for those, along with the late Bob Aikens doing play-by-play, and did those for a few years, and still kind of dabbled in some other broadcasts at times, helped Sagan out for 20 games one year. And then, eventually was approached about the position in Sarnia as being the station manager, but also knowing, station manager, but also jump in the booth. And of course I said, yes, that'll work very well. It was an adjustment a work-life balance adjustment in terms of the position, but having to move to Sarnia, of course, going from Peterborough to Sarnia is an adjustment for anybody, just, the geography and moving about 4 hours away from where you've lived your entire life. But no, it was a lot of fun, and jumped in that first year in Sarnia was the Stamkos' second year, where he scored 58 goals and went on to be the first overall pick. And Lee Cunningham and I called those games together. Lee is the play-by-play guy, and I was the color guy and host. And then Lee left for Saginaw the next year and just shifted one chair over and continued on ever since. So always sort of had my hand in either the play-by-play or color side. Even one of my most enjoyable series and situations was back in the 07 playoffs when we went up, took a Your TV crew up. It wasn't Your TV then, but that's of course what it is now. Went up to Sudbury because there was no television in Sudbury at the time. And we did the third round series between Belleville and Sudbury, the OHL Eastern Conference Final. And every game went to overtime. And the sixth game went to triple OT. And I called that triple overtime winning goal by Matt Diaz that I still occasionally go back and look at, just because the place was jammed. And you could just see what it meant to those people in Sudbury and what a great team that was, the Felinos and Mark Stahl and everyone involved there, and just a whole lot of fun. And, and then I went back up there to help out with some games in the final as well, working some intermissions, and just, so many different opportunities, and seeing so much of the league over those years, sort of jumping into various broadcasts and dealing with so many great people has been, a big thing. But yeah, if I go through, exciting moments, definitely, watching a jammed Sudbury arena going deep into overtime and then winning the OHL East in triple OT back in 07 certainly was a blast.
Yeah, so jammed Sudbury Arena, you can't come up with too many better atmospheres in the league. I mean, even I was actually blown away, and now I understand why the Canada-Russia series keeps going back to Sudbury, because they love the Canada-Russia series.
Oh,
and they pack that place out, and it's definitely a great atmosphere when you get a full crowd in there. So Sting Nation, the Hive, whatever you want to call it, certainly been a little spoiled over the past decade in terms of some of the star power that's come through the city. You go back to Steve Stamkos, as you mentioned, but from there, Alex Galchenyuk, Nail Yakupov, Tony DeAngelo, Jacob Chikrin, Pavel Zacha, and of course, most recently, Jacob Perreault, a first-round pick by the Anaheim Ducks. I know some of those names haven't necessarily resulted in deep playoff success for the franchise, but fans in Sarnia have always had some really talented players to keep tabs on.
Well, that's exactly it. And being given the opportunity where you can go watch a game in Sarnia and watch future NHL superstars for about a tenth the price as you're going to pay to watch them play a year or two down the road. And yeah, it goes back for me in Sarnia to the Stamkos year with 58 goals, finished his OHL career with exactly 100 in 2 seasons, not 99, not 101, exactly 100. And just some of the things that he did was just insane. I remember he had 2 games against Windsor, 3 weeks apart, exactly 3 weeks apart. He scored the overtime winner in both games at the exact time of overtime, the exact seconds of overtime. It's like, okay, that's just scary how good he is. And you're right. And Matt Martin, of course, was part of that group. And then, yeah, you go through the list and, watching Nail Yakupov play, and I know he's gone back to Russia to play now after being a first overall pick, but it was almost like Harlem Globetrotters on ice, watching him a little bit with the stuff that he could do and, go to the opposing blue line, not like the look of it. So he just goes and spins back and go to a blue line. I'll just wind it up again, and then score it between the defenseman's legs and put it upstairs top shelf. And just some of the things he did. I remember we used it in one of our, rewind games this fall, where he scored with about 4 seconds to go against Guelph to win the game and turned a nothing play into a breakaway, and just so many other things, or scores a hat trick and then delivers a huge hit in the corner that actually broke the glass like 10 seconds later. And that was, I just spit out "Welcome to the Nail Yakupov Show," and that was in his draft year, and that ended up going all over, going viral and being used by all the networks. So definitely been a lot of excitement. Indeed, DeAngelo, Chikrin, so many guys that have gone on to success in the pros. And Connor Murphy's another player who was here for a little while. Reed Boucher, who's now playing overseas, but he has the Sting all-time goal scored record. He was the guy that would shoot from the parking lot. He'd just shoot from anywhere. And Jacob Perreault has sort of adapted that a little bit, where shoot from anywhere, and a lot of times they go in, even if it doesn't look like they're going to go in. But so many people you deal with and get a chance to cross paths with, and just to steal a line from my friend Peter Lubardius, good people. a lot of good people, whether they've gone on to NHL success or whether they've gone on to success in life. It's certainly been a lot of fun, and certainly, a lot of entertaining hockey. And indeed, that's where, while Sting fans would love to see longer playoff runs, they've had that chance to see so many good players come through. And of course, as any OHL fan can, see great players come through on the other teams as well and get a chance to enjoy watching them. And Sarnia had some, gave a scare to the Erie Otters the one year where Sarnia, Erie won the series in 5, but Sarnia put a little scare into them. They won the first game. There was an overtime game in Sarnia and everything like that. And that was with the McDavid, Strome, DeBrincat crew, and still kind of hung around. And people still talk about that series. And talking to Daniel Nikandrov recently, he said, yeah, we put a little scare into Erie. And I think that's where, people can still be entertained and see a lot of entertaining hockey.
Perhaps as a native of the city, you could speak a little bit about the hockey community in Sarnia. I mean, not the biggest city in the league, but I've spoken to enough people there to kind of get the impression it's a pretty close-knit community, a number of very dedicated Sting fans. In fact, I mean, and perhaps not in terms of overall volume, but just with respect to enthusiasm at some of the Sting games I've attended over the years, I found there's a contingent of pretty rowdy fans that really get into the game and have some fun at the rink.
Absolutely. It's sort of, there are various little sections, for example, there's a crew in section 106, and they're very tight. They're very passionate about the Sting. And then they also spend a lot of time together away from the rink as well. They've gone on road trips and things like that, and people that I've got a chance to meet over the years. And there's definitely, a very passionate group, and it extends out with, of course, the Billets are in some of that group as well. Of course, all the Billets are very passionate, but when I say the 106 group, there are a few that have been Billets over the years, and that's indeed it. And I think we see that in so many OHL communities, that it's that smaller, tight-knit group that is so passionate about their team. And sure, they celebrate successes and they get frustrated when things don't go their way, and they have an opinion. And sometimes it's the opinion that gets shared at the restaurant after the game, that, they're frustrated. And, if they were the coach, they would have done this. Or if they were a player, why wouldn't the player have done that? That's just the passion of a hockey fan. And there's certainly no shortage of that. And, I've been blessed to see that across the league, but definitely in Sarnia, the passion of Sarnia Sting fans doesn't take a back seat to anybody when it comes to, being, passionate about the team, and as I say, celebrate successes and be frustrated when things don't go their way. You want your fan base to be frustrated when things don't go your way, because that shows the passion.
The Sting last won a West Division title in 2016. They finished second in 2018. So there was a window there where the club was quite competitive. The past 2 seasons have been what some might call a bit of a rebuild. I know Darian Hatcher's on the record saying his vision of the Sting program is one that could perhaps mirror what's happened in Owen Sound, where they're just consistently competitive year in and year out. Last year's team finished at the bottom of the Western Conference, but is there reason for optimism in Sarnia moving forward with, a guy like Jamison Reese being 19 now, of course, Ben Goodrow looking like he'll be a frontline OHL goalie, and of course, a guy like Jacob Perreault, as we mentioned earlier?
Absolutely. And there's a group that has grown together over the last few years, and so many other players. Braden Guy is in that group. You go through Ashton Reeser on defense, who missed a lot of time last season with an injury. Just one of those really steady guys on the blue line. He's not going to draw a whole lot of attention when it comes to the score sheet, but definitely scouts going to keep an eye on him, because someone who can be tough to play against and take care of his own zone. And indeed, Goodrow, Ethan Langevin, of course, has held down the fort for the last couple of seasons and come along. And so many players Sarnia has developed themselves over the years has really helped, and then just do a little bit of tweaking when there was an opportunity. But, you talk about Darian Hatcher's vision. Sarnia kind of went for a while, about a decade, where they kind of take a run and then sort of bottom out a little bit. And that was one of the discussions as well. Avoid the bottoming out, where stay competitive, hang around all the time. Sarnia had a stretch where, 06, 10, and 14, they had the first overall pick in the OHL priority selection. Got some great players out of that in Stamkos, Galchenyuk, and Chychrun. But sometimes, no, you don't want to be in that position. You want to, when you have a bit of a down year, you still compete for a playoff spot. You're still competitive, and then take a run at things when the opportunity presents itself. And, be in that position, a couple of years ago, going to the second round and playing a very competitive series and a very intense series against the Kitchener Rangers. that the Rangers eventually won and then went on to play the Greyhounds in the Western Final. But I think that's where, fans get a chance to see that and see some exciting hockey. And that's what we've seen in the Hatcher-Legwand era of owning the team and being involved in the coaching staff as well, of being very competitive. And, a lot of credit has to go to general manager Nick Sinclair, who's now, of course, no longer the general manager. Dylan Sika has taken over. But Nick did a great job with bringing in good players, but also players that were a good fit, strong character players. And that's the one thing I've noticed now and throughout my time in Sarnia is that I would say of now, this would be season 14 for me. Almost every season, there's a couple that might scratch your head a little bit, but most they had a good crew of fine young men that certainly they got it. And it was, they did things the right way. On the ice, who knows how things played out, but off the ice, you could just see there were just a strong group, a real tight-knit group, got along well, did things the right way. Obviously, there was never any issues. They just, they didn't have to be told to do things. They just did it. And the players took care of themselves.
Of course, moving forward, you mentioned Dylan Sika taking over as general manager, and we've seen a couple personnel changes for the Sting. It appears David Legwand's going to transition into a bit more of a front office role with the club, perhaps take some time scouting and seeing what's out there across the league. Mark Mancari joining the club as an assistant coach, and of course, a former Stanley Cup champion, Chad LaRose, being named the club's director of U.S. scouting. Should be interesting to see where the franchise goes from here. Appears there's a few sort of changes in the works.
Yeah, Dylan Sika worked right under Nick Sinclair, so I think that's a pretty seamless transition from that standpoint. And then, just bringing in people who have a good pedigree in hockey. Mark Mancari, graduate of the Ottawa 67s, and guy was pretty strong OHLer, had a good pro career. Got a chance to get a taste of coaching with the Ice Dogs last year, but now a little closer to home as he lives in London, so can make that trip up and down the 402. Hopefully the snow stays off of it, because that can be fun to commute on in the winter when the snow goes through there and the wind. But and Chad LaRose as well. And LaRose is a guy who's been connected to the U.S. hockey community in that Detroit area for years, and just has a lot of connections with players he played with, and whether at the pro level, and of course when he played in the OHL too. So I think that's where there's sort of those good connections and setting things up to develop just an overall good program. And we've seen that over the past decade of just a good program when you put everything together, and it shows, whether players moving on to pro hockey or players using the OHL education program and continuing their schooling and having success and getting their degree and moving on. And that's, I think, the mark of a good overall OHL program. And is when you're able to develop players for hockey, for pro hockey, but also develop fine young men when it comes to getting degrees. And that's even some of the people I talked about earlier that I've had a chance to catch up to. I'm talking to them. They've got university degrees in their back pocket now, and they're not that far removed from playing for the Sarnia Sting. A Nick Androv, a Brody Barrick, a Nathan Charletti. Daniel Broussard's another one who, of course, had success in Sarnia, and then had success and has had success in the business community coming out of Sarnia. He and Charletti had their first year university done before they left Sarnia, and then went on and continued on with the OHL education program. So I think that's the big thing. And that's been the fun thing with catching up with some of these guys, is showing that obviously they've developed both on and off the ice very strongly.
Certainly, the hallmark of the OHL and the academic incentives that are involved for players. It's great to hear some of those good stories out of Sarnia. Terry, it's always a good time talking hockey with you. I'm sure we'll be doing it again real soon. Thanks for joining me on this final segment of OHL Voices. It's been a real pleasure to get to know some of the guys across the league who bring us all the action. February 4th, it seems a ways away, but I'm sure with the World Juniors, that'll keep us locked in, and it'll be here before we know it. It's been a pleasure chatting.
Hey, anytime. You know where to find me. I've been waiting for your call.
Thanks, Terry. Talk to you soon.